Welcome to the Freelance Writing Podcast, hosted by Melanie Green. In this space, we'll discuss freelance writing and all of the challenges that comes with running this type of business. In this episode, we're going to discuss how to manage client feedback as a freelancer. I will tell you that I've been on both sides of this coin. I have worked as an editor and a proofreader and a manager, as well as the writer or the creative, if you will. I will say that as an editor, I've noticed, especially like book writers, are very sensitive sometimes to feedback. And even if it's valid feedback, it's their work, their baby, they want to protect it. So I want to say I definitely understand that. But when it comes to feedback in general, when you're working independently as a freelance writer, you need to be fairly open to it. Not all feedback will be valid, so that's something I will say. So for instance, I have had multiple instances where literally the same piece of writing, one newer client did not like it, and another client thought it was the best thing ever. So it really, you have to be honest that it's fairly subjective. So just because one client says it's bad, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is. I really look for trends when it comes to client feedback. One-off, I wouldn't necessarily get so concerned. But if there's something that's coming up consistently, like clients are saying, your conclusions are not as strong as I would hope, and this is a feedback that you're getting over and over again, it's something that's definitely worth exploring because maybe that's something that's very true. For me in particular, I will say that one of the things I've noticed through that feedback is that I am not necessarily the best bubbly and floofy writer. I'm a very professional writer. And so I'm great for businesses and law firms and dentists and marketing agencies. Occasionally, I'll get a brand that'll say, I want really ethereal content and it to be very friendly and warm and to be very bubbly and poppy. And those are usually a sign that it's not going to work out. That's not really the tone that I produce super well. It's not very authentic for me. And so through feedback, I've really identified that whether we're writing about pet food or CBD oil is not necessarily the greatest fit. Other times I'll get clients that really contradict themselves. So in these instances, I don't take it quite as seriously. I just accept that people have different opinions. Some are more valid or less valid. I remember one time a client came to me and it was a first project. And they wanted to write about SEO, and I write a lot about SEO. I have a lot of clients that want content about SEO. I work for a lot of agencies that use me as like sort of their SEO blog writer, so that's what I write about for them on their blog. And so he had asked me to write about 2 SEO topics. And so I did, and I knew them very well. They're things that I have about 10 years of expertise at this point on, and I wrote fairly long form articles, so like 1,200 word articles. And he just basically said that it was basic and outdated and all of these things, which it really wasn't, okay? But I was like, okay. So instead of trying to chase him for payment, which he would, and he said he would just throw them out, I said, I appreciate it, but if it's okay, I'll keep them. And so I went to another client with the exact same articles, and they thought they were amazing, and published them. And we continue to work together even today. So again, it just really depends on your audience. Another thing I really want to talk about is really the feedback systems on popular freelancing platforms. These are like Upwork and Fiverr. I will tell you that for the most part, they're fairly client-centric and they're frustrating. And so you have to just be careful. You want to play the game. You want to learn how to get better at those. But a lot of times the scores and the feedback that you get from there aren't necessarily related to your performance. And so I wouldn't get too tied up into it. For Upwork, the only ones leaving you feedback are ended contracts, which I think is inherently problematic because a lot of the work I do on Upwork is consistent. It's over a long period of time. Those people are not, they're not leaving feedback because we've never ended the contract, but they're the bulk of my income on that platform. And I think that it's a shame that a client, I've done one project with who maybe didn't have their payment method activated or who was very non-responsive gets to weigh in so heavily on, your score. So just be careful about that. The other thing is, like on Fiverr, I know that communication's a big thing, and so it wants you to communicate within 4 hours to get 100% communication. And the problem is they could message you at 3 in the morning, right? And that 4-hour clock still applies. So these are just some things to keep in mind, that feedback it's important to look at, but it's not necessarily the only factor. And one last thing I really want to talk about here, kind of briefly, is that a lot of times clients will think that their rules, their style guide, their process is innovative and it's the only one like it. And the process is the same as everyone else, and it'll be something like research competitors and use H2s and have a meta description. And these are things that you do for every client. And so sometimes, it's important to remember that you still want to be respectful. You don't necessarily want to say, oh, yeah, we do that everywhere else. But just know that sometimes when they do provide feedback, they're really trying to kind of assert their particular style, and they don't have the experience necessarily of working with so many clients at once. So they don't know what the style guides are for everyone else. So they think that theirs is original. And so you just need to be mindful of that. And there are changes, maybe one wants a type 11 font, and so you just be mindful of those minor changes and respectful of everything else. Thanks for spending some time with me discussing freelance writing. If you'd like to connect with me further, please feel free to reach me at my website at www.melaniegreen.info.